This is John Boehner. So I told the speaker, go with Chatty, congratulate me, etc. And I told him, I said, by the way, if you have a minute, he said, I got a minute. I said, look, I just want to let you know, I think there's some things that you and I are probably not on the same page about, and I just assume kind of get it all out there now so we don't have a battle when I'm successful. He said, well, what are those things? And I mentioned them to him, like some of them I mentioned to you tonight. And his response to me is, he said, Gary, you just do a good job representing the constituents of the 47th District. That's all we'll ask you to do, and that's what I will do. Thank you.
Can you read the question again so I can answer the question?
What is your record on supporting ideas or legislation that you believe in, but which your party was opposed? How would you handle going against your party's position, and what issues might be involved or have been involved?
I have gone against my party. I do have a record of standing up for the people of California. I have fought for the people of my district and for the people of California to do what's the right thing, regardless of party affiliation. For example, in 2001, when they did the redistricting of the state senate, the state legislature, the assembly, the congressional seats, Long Beach lost its congressional seat. It was cut up, carved up. We got part of Orange County, part of LA County. I voted against that, against my party's wishes. I voted against it. I then joined and was one of the founding members of the bipartisan caucus in the legislature. My responsibility was to create an independent redistricting commission. I first started, and that was to take away the power of drawing lines from the legislature and give it to a community group. I couldn't get a second. I couldn't get anyone to even pass that motion or to give me a second. I fought for years and years to do that, finally moving it with a 2/3 vote out of the Senate. The same thing, and then not having both parties would not support it in the other house, and therefore I worked with the governor to put it on the ballot. I supported it on the ballot, and today that's given me the opportunity to be here. Recently, I was the chair of transportation. I fought to have a high-speed rail on the ballot. I did oversight hearings. But when the vote came down to spend $6 billion in the Central Valley, I said that's irresponsible. We can't have a plan. We can't do that without a plan. You can't spend money irresponsibly. Democrats all voted for it. They chose. They said you can't. You have to do it. I voted for the people of California and stood up for the fiscally responsible way to do it.
Another question for you.
Yes.
This is to both of you, of course. Do you support amending campaign finance laws to eliminate unlimited secret money that Citizens United decision made possible?
I think I begin with that, and obviously it's just a continuation of my answer, yes. When I was first elected to the Long Beach City Council, I was struck, even in 1992, how expensive it was and that there was special interest controlling the elections. I then pulled together, as I do with everything, citizens, groups of people to work with me to put on the ballot an initiative here in Long Beach to have real campaign finance reform and not have special interest control. People on the council and business interests all said, you're taking away our interests. All right, I worked with our community. We passed Proposition M, and we now have some of the strongest controls on contributions in the country is in this city. So I have worked for campaign finance reform, and as I said before, I strongly dislike the very concept that a corporation is a person and is entitled to the same protection of free speech that a person does. A corporation is not a person. They have now skewed the field, and now tremendous sums of money are now part of campaigns. I do not like independent expenditures. I agree with Gary. I would like to see money that's just raised in the community and have people be accountable and responsible to the people that they serve. That was the guiding principle that I did the Independent Redistricting Commission. Representatives have to be responsible to their communities. Then we will get good government. And right now, they're not responsible to their communities. They're responsible to special interests. I have fought that my entire career. I will continue to fight that in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. DeLong, the same question. Do you want to repeat it or do you not?
No, I'm good with it. I think I give you a shorter answer than the question is. But before I answer, my wife Donna walked in, so let me introduce her and say thank you very much for coming. You're in the back. Our daughter Katie, thank you. We had a little babysitter issue, so she ran a little bit late. But I can tell you that campaigning is a partnership. You cannot do it without a strong partner. In fact, my wife's most recent contribution to the campaign is tonight's our anniversary. So I love you, honey. But anyway, thank you. But I've got a very short answer, so I'll stay within my time limit. Yes, Alan and I agree on that. I do support significant campaign finance reform. I think the special interest money does not serve you or I well. It conflicts your elected official. It generally results in decisions that are bad for the community. I also agree that I don't like the Citizens United decision. That's certainly going to not make things better. It's going to make things worse, in my opinion. But I also think we need a level playing field. So you got to be careful. If you say, well, this group can't contribute, but that group can, then you've caused another problem, other unintended consequences. So I don't agree with that decision, but I do think more needs to be done to do some campaign finance reform. It is not serving us well today. Thank you.
And I have another question for you. What should be the federal government role in education?
Minimal. As I mentioned, we have 3 daughters, college to 1st grade. What has the federal government done for their education? No, I can't think of anything either. But here's my concern as a taxpayer. Right, so a certain portion of our tax money goes for education, which hopefully we all support. The federal government takes a piece off, the state government takes a piece off, and by the time all these bureaucracies take a piece off, what's left in the classrooms with the teachers for our kids? And the answer is not enough. So while I do support investing in education, I think those investments need to be at the classroom level, not at the federal level. Thank you.
Mr. Lowenthal?
Well, let's get a clear picture of what the role of the federal government is today and whether it's too much or too little. Right now, in the funding of public education in the state of California, about 45 cents on the dollar comes from your property taxes. About an equal amount comes from the state legislature to the local school districts. That means that there is 10 cents on the dollar, primarily, that comes from the federal government. And what they do with that 10 cents, I support. They make sure that underserved populations do get served. There would not be any special education funds if it was not for the federal government. There would not be funds for children who have other types of severe learning disabilities without that. What we need to do, and the other thing that the federal government has done recently under Race to the Top and previously under President Bush, under No Child Left Behind, is to set standards on how we want our schools to be run. I think it's important to set high standards. I think the federal government should be a partner with the states and with local communities and not impose their standards, but to work with it. And that's what's happening today. All the states have come together to form what is called 46 of the 50 states, not imposed by the federal government, but a federal national mandate to create a common core standards. And so what is going to happen, we are about to embark on a great experiment in this country in which whether you graduate from a school in Ohio or California, you will have the same kinds of curriculum, and we will then move forward on assessment techniques that really measure how students are doing based upon these common core standards. We are about to move forward with great educational changes in this country. The federal government plays a part. The real work on that will be done at the state and at the local level, and that's really what the role should be.
Thank you. Now I have another question for you. Despite the expression of support for higher education across all political lines, public higher education has been one of the hardest hit by budget cuts in recent years. What role should the federal government play in ensuring access and affordability to those who wish to pursue education and training beyond high school?
Well, I think we have to look at what role anybody that's funding higher education should play, whether it's the state or the federal government. And let's have a little bit of truth. Let the truth be told here. When Governor Brown came into office in terms of education and why there is not, the governor said, hey, we're going to be short, we cannot raise, we pay enough money for education, we have tried not to cut education, and he asked the Republicans would they support extending those taxes that already were on the books and not letting them expire to fund higher education and to fund education. 5 of them said, and we only needed a few, 5 of them said yes, they would. But they were attacked by their own party and not allowed to do it. They were told that they would lose their position. So, since the government had to balance their budget, it's over 50% of our budget is education, we were not able to fund higher education. We were not able to maintain what we had here in California, which is the greatest higher educational system in the country, which was affordable and accessible, and we're now trying to struggle to keep that, but we can only do that by building a bipartisan consensus and having everybody step up and pay their fair share. The money doesn't just appear. We have to support higher education, but we have to have it through additional revenues.
Mr. DeLong.
Well, you're going to see some differences between us on this question. First of all, Alan talked about these wonderful federal programs and guidelines and measurements. Well, let me just tell you all, they're not working. They're not working. Things are not getting better. So that money is wasted. All those tens of millions of dollars of the federal bureaucracy is wasted. None of it's helping your kids and your grandkids in the classroom. So let's not pour any more money in that approach. Alan wants to make it a partisan issue. It's the Republicans' fault. It's a bipartisan issue. They're both responsible for the status of education in the state. It's not the other party's fault. That's the problem with people like him. If you want to blame the other party, no, it is both parties' fault. They're not prioritizing education high enough. Those cuts are devastating. Recent article by President Alexander said that we have funding back to 1965 levels of education, of higher education here in the state of California. That's awful. That's what the state legislature has done. That's been their priorities. He says we need more revenue. How about cutting expenses? The city of Long Beach has 20% fewer employees in the last decade. The state of California has 20% more employees, 60,000 more employees. Now, I'm not saying we should go around and lay everybody off. That's not going to help our economy. How about some attrition? How about just learn to do more with less like we are here in the city of Long Beach? Let's work a little harder. Let's stretch a little more. Let's figure out how to get our labor costs under control. That's what needs to happen. It is not just more revenue, because I'm going to tell you, people are struggling. If you're unemployed, you're extraordinarily struggling, but middle class families are struggling today. The last thing we want is more taxes. And by the way, if you say, well, let's just tax the wealthy some more, well, those are the folks that are providing capital out there. They're capital investments, they're growing those businesses. You don't have that capital in those businesses, you're going to have other economic problems. So I don't believe more taxes are the answer at any level. So I'm not picking winners and losers. I'm not putting one class against the other. I don't think in today's time you want to put more taxes on any level. Now, should we close loopholes and raise the tax revenue? Absolutely.
No.
Stop.
Mr. DeLong, this past summer, Congress passed stopgap legislation to keep the interest rate on federal subsidized Stafford student loans from doubling in 1 year for loans originating as of July 1st, 2012. How would you plan to improve the situation when college students all over the country face the steep increase in the interest rates from 3.4% to 6.8% for the loans they will have to borrow beginning July 1st, 2013?
Having a daughter that has one of those loans, I feel very strongly about it. No, I am opposed to increasing those interest rates, at least until the economy recovers. Those kids today, if they were getting into great jobs and doing well financially, maybe they could afford it. But that's not what's happening today. It is extraordinarily difficult to get a job that's commensurate with your experience and your education. So I am adamantly opposed to increasing those interest rates. Now again, I'm not saying that 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, if the economy is booming and these kids all have great jobs and they're doing very well, is it appropriate to a market rate? It might be. I'm open to the discussion. Let's look at it. But today, I am absolutely opposed to it. It would be crazy in my mind for those kids. Many of them have very, very expensive tuition bills and loans now that then make it even more difficult for them to get started in life.
Thank you. Mr. Lowenthal?
Well, I agree that the future of this nation is, and the best job developer is an educated workforce and people who can afford to go to college and have the ability, if they take out loans, to be able to pay them and not have it for a lifetime having to pay off debts. We know that it was the president this year that fought to lower those rates and for the longest time could not get the House of Representatives and the Congress to go along. At the very end, they agreed to go along and lower those rates for a 1-year period. I agree they should be lowered. They should not go up in the future. I think now both parties have come to realize that we must promote and invest in the future. And the way you do that is not only by lowering the interest rate on loans, but providing more incentives and more resources to higher education. That's what the American Jobs Act does. That's what we need to do, and that's where we need to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll ask you another question. Research and development play a key role in driving U.S. innovation, productivity, and economic growth. If sequestration occurs, a cut of $12.5 billion in federal R&D spending in the year FY13 would drastically reduce the nation's gross domestic product through fiscal year 2021. R&D cuts could also cause job losses of about 200,000 in fiscal year 2013. What would you do to support basic research and medical research?
Well, I think that the first thing is to look at the differences that have been proposed before the Congress right now, or before the American public. There's the president's budget, and then there's the Ryan budget that has been proposed. The Ryan budget cuts education by almost a third. Almost a third. It cuts research and development by almost 20%. And that's how it does its reduction. So there's a real difference in terms of who should be funding and what the role of funding. Sequestration came about because the Congress and on both sides, and I agree with Gary, there's enough blame to go around on both sides, they could not come to an agreement on what those deficit cuts would be, and they came to an agreement on the sequestration. That is based upon both parties and saying if they do not come together and have a budget done and with a deficit reduction, that this will go into effect. I would hope that once the Congress reconvenes with our new members, that we would not have sequestration, that we would come to an agreement in terms of what is a reasonable and rational deficit reduction plan and what are the resources that are necessary to pay for it. Again, we're just saying when you need additional resources that we should pay at the same rate that the wealthiest paid under President Clinton when we had the greatest economic growth in this nation's history.
Thank you. Mr. DeLong. Do you want the question repeated, or do you
I'm
want?
good with it. Thank you. I think Alan and I are mostly in agreement on this one. And the issue to me just isn't investment in R&D, but it really is sequestration. Sequestration is going to have a terrible impact on our economy. It truly is a fiscal cliff. If you think things are bad enough today, it will get dramatically worse. Now, I'm actually more optimistic than Alan. I'm hoping that they're not going to wait for the new session. I hope they will come back in and we'll get this thing figured out before the end of the year, because everybody loses if they don't. I mean, there won't be any winner here. It's not one party wins and they show the other party. Everybody, particularly us in this room, is going to lose if they don't figure it out. And they need to figure it out. They need to stop bickering and start fixing it. They need to figure out how to work together pragmatically. They need to figure out how to compromise. And I understand nobody wants to give up their principles. I get that.